Hi everyone. The sky over Qinghai was a dull gray that morning. The cold wind blew dust and dry leaves across the rocky plains, sweeping through the quiet valleys at the foot of the Qilian Mountains. No one expected that in just minutes, the peaceful land would reveal a secret buried for thousands of years. For 17 a.m. local time, the earth shook. The initial tremor felt like a distant rumble, then suddenly turned into a violent quake that cracked roads, shook small villages, and caused part of an ancient structure to collapse. The Great Wall of China, a remote section in northern Qinghai, rarely visited by tourists, crumbled over 60 meters in length. Massive stones fell, crashing down the hillside and opening a massive chasm beneath. But among the panic and rubble, the rescue team found something unusual. Beneath the ancient fallen stones, a hidden passage was uncovered, sealed by centuries of compacted dust and hardened earth. Strange symbols were carved into its surface. Not Chinese, not Latin, not any known script. "What is this?" one of the workers whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. Word of the mysterious fissure spread rapidly. Within 24 hours, archaeologists, linguists, and secret military units from Beijing were deployed to the scene. The site was immediately locked down. Drones circled overhead, armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Inside a temporary command center, Professor Liang Yue, an expert in classical Chinese history, stared at a monitor with a pale face. The drone's live feed showed a narrow tunnel descending deep into the earth, its walls lined with strange, ancient inscriptions. But one phrase stopped his heart cold. Zulkifli al-Salem. It's Arabic, he whispered. That's the name of a prophet. Silence fell over the room. On the screen, the tunnel led to an enormous stone door, faded gold etched above it, inscribed with one chilling phrase, "The tomb of the one who endured." The first step had been taken, and the world had no idea it was on the brink of the most shocking historical revelation of the century. The tunnel was silent. Only the sounds of heavy breathing and the soft crunch of boots echoed off the stone walls. Headlamps flickered against the aged surfaces, revealing dusty carvings, images of a robed figure with hands lifted to the sky. These carvings, they're not from ancient Chinese civilization, murmured Professor Liang Yue, his voice barely above a whisper. Behind him, Dr. Amina Siari, a script expert from Malaysia flown in under high secrecy, studied the symbols with wide, disbelieving eyes. She recognized the pattern. Ancient Semitic symbols, an impossible fusion of early Hebrew and primitive Kufic Arabic. Such a blend had never been discovered in mainland China, let alone beneath the Great Wall. They walked deeper into the earth. The temperature dropped. The air grew heavier. At one point, even the soldiers escorting them started to feel uneasy. One of them, a young man named Lu, suddenly stopped and shivered. "Something's watching us," he said quietly. They ignored it for now. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a vast circular chamber. In the center stood a tomb-like structure, surrounded by 8 towering stone pillars. The walls were covered in stories no one could read, but the paintings said enough. One panel depicted a sea splitting in two. Another showed a man holding a staff walking with the poor. And in the center, a calm-eyed man sitting inside a cave, surrounded by radiant light. Beneath that painting, one sentence was carved. "Here rests the guardian of the East, Dichu al-Kifl, servant of the Chosen One." A faint rumble echoed through the chamber. The earth quivered, as if the tomb itself recognized the presence of humanity once more. One of the researchers gently touched the stone sarcophagus at the center. Suddenly, the torches along the walls burst to life on their own, blue flames flickering, as if to welcome them. Everyone froze. What have we just discovered? Amina whispered, her eyes filled with emotion she couldn't explain. Liang didn't answer. He knew this wasn't just an archaeological find. It wasn't just a tomb. It was a message. And as expected, the first leak occurred. Someone from the team secretly released photos of the chamber to the outside world. Within 12 hours, the internet exploded. Conspiracy theories took over. Scholars, clerics, historians, and influencers clashed online. Behind closed doors, the Chinese government panicked. This was no longer a matter of national heritage. It was a spiritual time bomb. They had no idea. A storm was coming. A spiritual awakening was rising. And at its heart was a tomb that had waited in silence for thousands of years. For days after the discovery of the tomb, the site beneath the Great Wall had become a black zone. Satellite access restricted. Communication signals jammed. But the outside world already knew. A handful of leaked images had gone viral, spreading curiosity, fear, and awe across the globe. Inside the tomb, Liang Yue sat cross-legged before a small stone chest that had just been unearthed. Inside it lay ancient scrolls, carefully wrapped in crimson gold linen, surprisingly intact, despite being buried for millennia. Dr. Amina Siari gently unrolled the first scroll. The script was not only in early Arabic, but also laced with symbols she had never encountered before. And at the top of the scroll, a line was written, "O you who live in the days to come, if you are reading this, then my time has arrived." Her hands trembled. She read on. The message spoke of a chosen servant sent to the distant east to deliver a truth before the gates of time are sealed. The prophet Dhu al-Kifl, mentioned only briefly in scriptures, was revealed to have journeyed to a place untouched by divine revelation, the land of the dragon. This scroll held a prophecy. It described a great earthquake in the mountains, a wall that would crack, people lost in material darkness, searching for light in unexpected places, and a final line, 30 million souls shall awaken from their slumber. Liang turned to Amina. Is this a prophecy, or is it happening right now? Amina nodded slowly. We haven't just found a tomb. We've uncovered a message meant for our time. Outside the cave, thousands of people had begun gathering near Qinghai. Despite government warnings, they came, not as tourists, but as if drawn by a force they couldn't explain. One by one, people reported having the same dream. A man in white robes, glowing with soft light, calling to them in a language they didn't understand. But somehow, they felt it deeply. Return to the one before the gates close. Major news outlets erupted with headlines. Prophet's tomb discovered beneath Great Wall? Is this the end of an era? Could China be the lost land of the East mentioned in scripture? In a matter of days, search trends for Islam and Prophet Dhu al-Kifl exploded across China. Quran apps skyrocketed to the top of download charts. Thousands visited local mosques, asking for answers. Some cried upon hearing their first verses from the Quran. Meanwhile, the final scroll was unsealed. One last sentence remained. The veiled shall see, the blind shall recognize. The hour has come for truth to rise once more from the east. Liang closed his eyes. He could feel it, the world was shifting. And this was only the beginning. 2 weeks after the discovery of Prophet Dhu al-Kifl's tomb, the spiritual temperature in mainland China reached fever pitch. It wasn't due to politics or economics. It was something far more profound, a deep hunger for meaning. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #TombofZulkifli, #Light from the East, and #Hidden Truth trended across Weibo, Douyin, and even Twitter and TikTok. Thousands of videos surfaced, with people claiming to have the same dream. A man in white robes calling them with words of comfort and guidance. You have been chosen to awaken. In every corner of China, whether in the remote Yunnan province or the bustling streets of Beijing and Shanghai, people began searching for mosques. Most didn't know where to go, so they simply stood in the streets, holding signs that read, "I want to know who Zulkifli is." Mosques that had once been quiet and empty became overwhelmed with visitors. Local imams struggled to answer questions, offer Qurans, and guide the thousands of people who, without explanation, began to weep as they recited the opening verse of Surah Maryam, Surah Al-Kahfi, and Al-Baqarah. In just a few days, conversion skyrocketed not by hundreds but by hundreds of thousands, then millions. People who had never thought about religion were suddenly drawn to the light of truth. In a highly secured government meeting room in Zongnanhai, Beijing, officials were starting to panic. "What's happening?" a high-ranking official asked, his face pale. "This is no longer a social phenomenon," replied General Tan, one of the top military officials. "This is a spiritual awakening we can't stop." But in the shadows, a clandestine group known as the Obsidian Circle, a global network that had long protected the world's ancient, hidden secrets, felt a deep unease. They knew that if the messages from the tomb spread, it would shatter the very foundation of their influence. That place must be sealed. Every record, every trace of it must be destroyed, an anonymous voice said during a secret meeting in Geneva, before more people awaken. Meanwhile, in a small village near the tomb, a young man named Wei Run, an orphan with no religious background, experienced something he could not explain. In his dreams, he walked through a vast desert, and a man in white robes took his hand, saying, "In your hand is a key. When the time comes, recite the verse, and light will spread." Wei woke up with tears in his eyes. As he opened a small brochure he had picked up from the local mosque, his hands shook. The first page of the brochure read, "Aleph, Lam, Mim. This is the book in which there is no doubt." His heart raced as he read those words. A feeling of uncontainable energy surged through him, and he knew he too was part of this greater story. 2 months after the discovery of the tomb, reports showed that more than 30 million people in China had converted to Islam. This phenomenon was dubbed the Great Awakening of the East by major media outlets. But while millions celebrated, there were forces at play working in secrecy. Forces that would go to any length to obliterate the truth that had been revealed. The Obsidian Circle wasn't just acting to erase traces of the tomb. They were preparing for something far worse, the global spread of the truth. As night fell over the tomb site, the whispers of the past began to stir. Ancient texts were revealing themselves, and in the heart of China, a revolution of faith was quietly unfolding. The battle between truth and suppression had begun. The wind was sharp and cold across the ancient, crumbling stones of the Great Wall. Yet the air felt charged with an unseen energy, as if the very earth was vibrating with a force beyond human comprehension. Inside the chamber beneath the wall, Wei Ren stood motionless, his heart pounding. Before him lay the tomb of Dechu Al-Kifl, now illuminated by a soft, ethereal light that emanated from the stone sarcophagus. This wasn't a simple archaeological discovery. It was a moment of profound significance. Outside the cave, the world had begun to shift. More than 30 million people in China had embraced Islam, and similar awakenings were spreading across the globe. The message of the tomb had reached far beyond China's borders. Hundreds of millions were beginning to search for answers, drawn by the same dreams, the same visions, the same inexplicable pull toward the east. But not everyone was celebrating. The Obsidian Circle, the shadowy network of elites that had long controlled global narratives, now felt their grip loosening. They had underestimated the power of this ancient revelation. As Wei Ren looked down at the final scroll, the words on it glowed faintly, as if the tomb itself was speaking to him. When the veil is lifted, the light will flood the world. But beware, the dark will rise to consume it. The ground beneath him trembled again, this time more violently. The walls cracked, and a low, rumbling voice echoed through the chamber. The time has come. Suddenly, a group of heavily armed soldiers burst into the room, their rifles pointed toward Wei. The Chinese military, fearing that the truth would unravel everything, had moved in to seize control of the tomb and silence its message once and for all. But Wei Ren didn't flinch. He held the scroll high, letting the ancient words shimmer in the dim light. He knew it was no longer just about a tomb. It was about the awakening of humanity, the reclamation of lost knowledge, and the battle for the soul of the world. One of the soldiers, Lieutenant Zhao, a young man who had been among those tasked with securing the tomb, stepped forward. He was shaking, visibly torn. His eyes flickered between the scroll in Wei's hands and the weapon in his own. "Wei Ren, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion and fear. "You can't understand the forces you're dealing with. They'll kill us all if we don't stop this." But Wei simply met his gaze. His voice was calm yet firm. "I understand more than you think. The time for silence is over. We can't let them bury this truth. The world deserves to know." The soldiers hesitated, their weapons still trained on him, but their resolve was weakening. Around them, the air seemed to crackle with an invisible tension. Above, the earth quaked once again, a final warning that the world was about to change forever. The moment the broadcast began, it was as if the entire world held its breath. The footage from the tomb leaked online, showing Wei Ren standing in front of the sarcophagus, holding the final scroll. The ancient writing illuminated his face as he spoke. "This is the message of Dhu Al-Kifl, the one who endured. He came not just for the East, but for all of us. The time for the world to wake up is now." In cities from Cairo to New York, from London to Istanbul, the response was immediate. Thousands gathered in the streets, not in protest, but in revelation. People turned to each other, united by something they hadn't known they were searching for: faith, truth, a sense of purpose. But even as millions began to awaken, the Obsidian Circle acted quickly. They scrambled to control the narrative, flooding media outlets with disinformation and stoking fears of global chaos. They targeted key leaders and influencers, attempting to crush the movement before it could gain too much momentum. In Beijing, the highest echelons of power were in turmoil. The government could no longer deny the scale of the awakening. Some officials were still determined to suppress the message, but others, seeing the shifting tides, began to reconsider. Back at the tomb, the Obsidian Circle's agents arrived. They were dressed in black, their faces hidden behind masks. The situation had escalated beyond anything anyone had anticipated. This wasn't just about a tomb anymore. This was the last stand between light and dark. Wei Ren knew that the truth could no longer be contained. He looked at the final scroll one last time and read the last line aloud. "And when the darkness tries to extinguish the light, it is the East that will rise to guide the way." The moment he finished reading, the ground shook once more, and the tomb's entrance closed on its own, sealing the truth within. But the message had already been sent. The world had heard. The world was different now. China, once an impenetrable fortress, was opening up, engaging in discussions about faith and freedom in ways that had never been imagined. The Great Awakening wasn't just a spiritual movement. It had sparked a revolution of thought, a return to truth, and a call for unity. Wei Ren had disappeared. Some believed he had gone into hiding, others that he had been taken by the very forces he had stood against. But wherever he was, his legacy lived on. The light had been awakened, and as the sun set over the Great Wall, a quiet calm settled over the world. For now, the gates had been opened, and the truth had found its way into the hearts of millions.